Look, over the last 20 years as an investor and the last 8 years running a mortgage broking business, I've tested just about every strategy out there. Some of them worked, and some of them punched me in the face, and a few of them cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. But every one of those lessons helped me sharpen a system that actually works, through the ups, the downs, and everything in between. Since then, I built a $30 million property portfolio, been involved in over $50 million of property development projects through my development business, and had over $1.2 billion of finance conversations with clients as a part of Freedom Funding. So why does that matter to you? Because I've seen what happens when the market turns. I've lived through rising rates, falling prices, credit crunches, and investor FOMO. I've made mistakes that most people won't talk about and come through the other side even stronger. So what I'm sharing with you here, it's not theory and it's not secondhand opinion. It's the real stuff that's worked for me and for the clients that I get to help every day. Not just how to buy a property, but how to use property as a vehicle to grow, scale, and set yourself up for financial freedom. Now, obviously, I can't give you personal advice in a video like this, but if you're getting ready to buy and you want real guidance on how to map it out properly, then there's a link below where you can book a time to chat with my team. Because here's the truth. Most people will talk about owning a multi-million-dollar property portfolio, but they forgot why they got into property in the first place, which is to generate true financial freedom. But behind the scenes, they've got no structure, no plan, no exit strategy. In today's video, I'm going to break down the number one strategy that I've used, not just to build wealth through property, but to turn it into a machine that buys back your time, that gives you options and lets you live life on your terms. Whether that means scaling up or getting to a place where money is no longer a stress. Let's get into it. Now, a common scenario I see with people is that they've got an existing home, they've built up some savings in their offset account, and they're thinking about using those savings for the deposit to purchase an investment property. And look, that's the typical way that people do it. They build up the offset funds. Once they get to a 20% deposit and enough to cover the stamp duty and costs, they pull the trigger and they go and buy an investment property. But you see, the real game changer isn't just buying property. It's what you do after the purchase that makes the biggest difference. It's how you structure things, how you move your money, how you use the system to quietly accelerate the way that you generate wealth in the background without taking on more risk. It's a strategy that most investors don't hear about until it's too late. But once you understand it, you can never unsee it. And that strategy is called debt recycling. And just to be clear, this is not about chasing tax returns. This is about restructuring your debt in a way that helps with your long-term tax position, redirecting surplus cash flow into reducing bad debt and maximize tax efficiency, and setting things up so you're not just building wealth, but you're doing it in a way which is tax effective and improving your cash flow. See, the ideal way to structure that next purchase is to not use the cash in the offset account. Instead, release equity from your owner-occupier for the deposit, stamp duty, and associated costs. Set it up as a separate split with its own offset account so you can clearly account for the specific interest costs for tax purposes. And keep the loan for the investment property standalone, ideally at 80% LVR and interest only to preserve cash flow so you can continue to pay down your non-deductible debt. Now, why does this structure matter? Because you're keeping your cash against your non-deductible owner-occupier loan, therefore reducing the amount of non-deductible interest that you pay, whilst maximizing the deductible interest that you're using for the investment property that you just purchased. You're preserving your capacity to invest whilst reducing your non-deductible interest. And this way, over time, you're not just scaling a portfolio, but you're continuing to chip away at paying off your owner-occupied loan. Then we hit the wall that everybody hits at some point in time. We either run out of borrowing capacity or we run out of equity to use for the next investment. So here's where the recycling bit comes in. So let's say you've got a loan of $800,000 against your owner-occ home. You've got $200,000 in the offset account. Now, instead of using that $200,000 as a deposit, what you do is you reduce your owner-occupier loan limit from $800,000 down to $600,000. You've now reduced your owner-occupied debt limit as well as the minimum monthly repayments on that facility, which will then enable you to borrow more money from a borrowing capacity perspective and also let you use the equity in the property that you've just paid down. With the way that lenders look at deductible versus non-deductible debt, it often means that you can borrow more than the debt that you've just paid down. So in this example of paying down $200,000 of owner-occ debt, you can borrow $300K or potentially more of investment debt. Over time, you rinse and repeat, recycling capital, improving tax efficiency, and setting yourself up to scale. And for an extra tip, some banks actually have a specific debt recycling product that they use, and so you can use that product to continue to debt recycle over time without the need for a full new application. This can be especially handy for people that are looking to invest in shares rather than just in residential property. So ultimately the goal here is to end up with zero owner-occupied debt and only having tax-deductible investment debt sitting against your owner-occupied home. Now let's talk about equity, how it actually works and what the banks don't tell you. When it comes to pulling equity, there is a lot that the banks don't tell you up front. Most people will think logically, my property's gone up in value, I must be able to access equity now. But there are 3 filters that determine whether you can actually access that equity or not, and these 3 filters can make or break your next deal. Number 1, what is the bank's specific policy on releasing equity? So some banks will let you borrow up to 80% of the value of that property without any policy restrictions and without asking to see any evidence of what those funds are going to be used for. Others might cap the equity release amount, so it could be $100,000 or $250,000 or $500,000. And if you're going above those limits, they're going to want to see detailed evidence for what those funds are exactly going to be used for. This can often be a problem if you're trying to get ahead of the curve and prepare for your next investment purchase. Number 2, what is the bank valuation itself? This is one that commonly catches people off guard. There can be a huge difference between what you think the property is valued at and what the bank valuation comes back at. And again, those bank valuations can vary massively between different lenders. Here's a real example of where we had clients looking to release equity to buy their next investment. Their current lender came back with a flat no. According to them, there was zero equity available and the deal stalled. But we ran upfront valuations with 7 different lenders, and here's what came back. 2 of those lenders, lender number 2 and lender number 6, came back with much higher valuations. Both valued the property at over $900,000, and this was enough for us to be able to release an additional $45,000 in equity, which would make the next deal work for them. That was the difference between sitting on their hands and then making the next purchase work. And here's the key takeaway. It wasn't just about interest rates. It came down to which lenders valued the property more favorably and taking advantage of that valuation to push forward. This is where structure, strategy, and having the right finance partner can make all the difference. Number 3, what is your borrowing capacity with that lender? So even if the valuation stacks up and the lender policy will let you release equity, you still need to show that you can service the debt. This is where most investors get caught off guard because every lender has a slightly different serviceability calculator. Same income, same expenses, but your borrowing capacity, it can swing by hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on which lender you're talking to. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a real life example for a client. Same profile, different lenders. One lender's calculator showed that they could borrow $2.89 million, while another one capped them at $1.22 million. That is a massive $1.6 million difference in borrowing capacity between lenders. That is not a typo. And these are not obscure lenders either. Some of these are major banks. This is often one of the most overlooked parts of releasing equity. You could be asset rich on paper, have plenty of money in your offset account, and even have heaps of equity. But if the numbers don't stack up on the lender's serviceability calculator, then you're stuck. That is why strategic structuring matters so much, particularly if you're looking to use equity from your owner-occupier for your next purchase. Because the typical investor will look at it this way. You've got your home, and you've got your loan with your owner-occupied offset account. You're building up funds in that account. Once you've got enough, you pull those funds out of the offset, you pay your 20% deposit, you pay your stamp duty, and you buy your first investment property. So once the equity is there and ready to go, how you use it matters more than a lot of people think. Because at this point, most investors breathe a sigh of relief. The property's gone up, the bank says yes, and you've got your new loan and funds available. But from here, one wrong move could stall things for you for the next 5 years. Here's what I mean. You go to your bank and you ask them to release some equity. They say, sure, no problem. And then they add those funds to your existing facility. What just happened? Your new deposit money, meant for your new investment property deposit, has now been mixed in with your owner-occupied loan. What this can mean is that the interest may not be tax deductible because it has now created a mixed purpose loan in which it's very difficult to account for the interest that you're paying specifically for that investment debt. Now here's where it gets even worse. Some people think that they can release investment equity to then pay down their owner-occupier and have that equity as tax deductible equity. And sure, at a principal level, they think they're doing the smart thing and swapping tax deductible debt for non-tax deductible debt. But tax deductibility doesn't always follow the loan. It follows the use and purpose of those funds. If you use that investment equity release to pay down your owner-occupied loan, then it is non-tax deductible. That is the end. So if you use that investment equity release to pay down your owner-occupied loan, then that is a personal use and those funds are not deductible. And then you've got lifestyle temptations, renovations, a new car, a holiday, all funded by equity and all stretched over a new 30-year loan term. The problem here isn't the fun, but it's that the debt outlives the value. The holiday's over, the car's gone, but the repayments still continue and the debt is still there. And look, I'm not saying that you can't enjoy the benefits of hard work and using the equity that you've got available, but if you're using equity, you really want to make sure that you're using it to generate long-term financial value, not just for short-term lifestyle purposes. So what's the smart way to release equity to invest? You set up a separate loan split with its own offset account and ideally with an interest-only repayment mechanic. Once the loan is drawn down, those funds will sit in the offset account against the loan and there'll be no cost or repayment until the funds are drawn out for investment purposes. And when you do, it's clean, deductible, and structured in a way that will deliver tax efficiency and scalable growth. And that structure alone, it's what gives you flexibility and control, as well as the ability to scale without messing up your future options. This is where investors either set themselves up for success or quietly box themselves in. But here's the part that nobody talks about. It's not just about having equity. It's about how you pull it and what that decision does for everything that comes next. Because there are two ways that this can go. Number one, you go to your existing bank and they give you the green light to release equity. To increase your loan, they roll it into your existing facility. On the surface, it looks like you're ready to buy. But under the hood, you've just made the next few years even harder. There's no clean separation of funds, and the loans are not correctly structured for investment purpose. You can't properly track what's deductible, or worse, you may lose the deductibility altogether. So when you finally deploy those funds, you're not in a position of control. You're guessing. You're hoping that the structure holds up, and you're hoping that you're not ending up with non-deductible debt later on down the track. You've got no idea on how this impacts your ability to scale later on because you've mixed investment and owner-occupied debt in the same facility. Or number two, you set it up as a separate split as an investment purpose with an interest-only repayment mechanic and a 100% offset account against the loan. The funds are clean, traceable, and sitting there ready to deploy when you find your next investment. You're not paying down the debt, it's not costing you anything, so you don't have to rush into the next deal. You've got time to act strategically, and you've got the flexibility when the right asset comes along to move quickly. That setup doesn't help you just get the next property, it sets up the one afterwards and the one after that. Because it's not about the loan, it's about the structure of the loan, and whether that structure creates momentum or resistance. You can make the same move on paper, release $150,000 of equity, and have two completely different outcomes at the end of the day. And that's what can separate investors that build big portfolios and those that get stuck at 2 or 3 investments. All right, so what does this actually look like when it's set up properly? It's simple. You've got options. You're not sitting there wondering if you've got enough equity or wondering if the bank is going to knock you back from your loan application. You already know the funds are there, they're clean, and they're ready. You've got the structure that lets you move forward when you're ready, not when the bank feels like it. That's what changes the game. It's not just about getting the next deal across the line, it's about creating momentum without getting stitched up. And clients that have done it this way, well, they're not just stuck after one property, they're going again. They've got a few properties under the belt, they're paying down their owner-occupied debt faster, and they've got capacity to take on more. No guesswork, no drama, and the best part, they're not sacrificing their lifestyle to do it. They're still building money in their owner-occupied offset, their property is growing in the background, and the tax drag is reducing as their portfolio expands. And that's what this is all really about. It's not just, can I buy a property? It's about, can you continue building without blowing up your finances in the process? And when you get this right, you don't just grow your portfolio, you start to buy back time. Let's go back to something I mentioned earlier. If that client who was told by the bank that there was no equity available, if they had have accepted that, they would have missed out on their next deal completely. But we ran upfront valuations with 7 lenders. 2 came back stronger, and that's all it took to unlock the deposit for their next investment. Same property, same client, just a smarter structure and the right lender. If you've got equity sitting there and you're looking to make your next move, or you just want to make sure your setup is not holding you back, I've left a link in the description to book a call with my team. No pressure, just a proper look at the numbers, a quick conversation around your goals, and real clarity on what's possible from here. And just remember, brokers get paid by the bank, so there's essentially no cost to you. And if you're still in research mode, looking to understand the options before you move forward, I've also linked a video where I break down all the different ways that you can finance your investment property in excruciating detail. This has all the pros and cons of each strategy so you can work out what applies best for your own situation. So if that's you, I'll see you there.